Hi y'all, it's Joaquin Castro, and I wanted to give you an update. This morning I went to visit the South Texas ICE Processing Center, known as STIPC, in Pearsall, Texas. Now, this is an adults-only facility, so men and women, no children. The children and families we visited with last week are in Dilley, Texas. And I describe Dilley as a trailer prison because it's a series of trailers that the families have to stay in, and their movements are monitored and controlled and so forth. Well, if that's a trailer prison, STIPC is a prison. So in your imagination, or those of you that have been into a prison, when you think of a prison with the outside razor wire and the steel shutting doors and the white and tan walls, very bland, and the linoleum floors, all of it, that's what this is. Steel seats, steel toilets, that's what STIPC is. So there are about 1,700 people there right now, and it's men and women, and the vast majority of these people have no criminal history at all, have not committed a single crime. And so we met with a lot of folks, and there are just some really heartbreaking stories. I know that in our conscience there's the most sympathy for kids, because when people hear that there's a 2-month-old baby, for example, that's in that trailer prison in Dilley, or of course the story of Liam Ramos, a 5-year-old boy that I escorted back to Minnesota over this past weekend, I think that tends to get us the most. But when you hear these industry leaders, I just ran into some guys from South Texas, from the Rio Grande Valley in the construction industry, and they were very upset, and they had said this before, and there had been articles on it, about how they've lost their workforce, and there's nobody that's coming out to do the construction, so it's taking a lot longer to do residential and I assume commercial construction, and they're very upset about it. And a lot of them they're not liberal Democrats, most of them, they're either moderate or Republican, conservatives. Well, I'll tell you, I found your workforce. Okay, I found your workforce, and they're sitting over there at STIPC because of President Trump's policies. There were a bunch of these guys, one of them who said, I've been here 30 years, and I work construction, and I support my family, and they color code what these folks wear. So the dark blue is low, and then the orange, they categorize people according to threat level. So you got most of these people that have this dark blue, they look like sweatpants, sweatshirt and sweatpants. And they were saying, I support my family and my wife and my kids. Like this guy was saying, my wife, she has a work permit, but she hasn't been able to get work. And my kids, and I was the one that was supporting them. You have a lot of these guys that were the breadwinners in their family, and now their wife and their kids are out there without support. Another woman, and I got the ICE guy right away, she has several kids, and they're up in North Texas. And we were having a conversation, and then she told me that her mom was born in Laredo, Texas. Well, remember, if you have a U.S. citizen parent, then there's certain guidelines in the law, but you are likely to be able to qualify for citizenship, right? And so that woman very likely should not be sitting there at all. Even if they picked her up, she got there, she tells them, hey, one of my parents was born in Laredo in the United States, then there should be activity right away to say, hey, well, you may qualify to be a U.S. citizen, so why don't we figure that out first before we go through this whole deportation proceeding? But that's not what's happening. I mean, that lady's been there for months, even though her parent was a U.S. citizen, is a U.S. citizen. And so, there are a few more stories, and I got some notes here. We took a bunch of notes. We're going to try to follow up on cases and help folks. Remember, we have to get express permission from individuals who are detained or from their next of kin or their lawyers to be able to look into their case and get informed about their case. So there was one woman with gallbladder issues who talked about horrific pain, and before she got detained, she needed surgery, and now they're refusing to give it to her. Another woman that we sat with who was diabetic, and she said for the last 6 months that she hasn't gotten her diabetes medication because whatever the medication is that she takes is very expensive, and so she hasn't gotten the attention that she needs medically. And then they told me the story. They told me the story of the guards there who were making fun of a woman that they said was in her 60s yesterday, actually, who needs dialysis. It's a woman that needs to get dialysis, and that they were making fun of her, when they were talking to her, even though she needs dialysis. There were other folks who also complained of medical issues. Again, people complained of food, that there were things like worms in the food. There were a lot of people there also. There were a lot of Ecuadorians there. There were people there who, especially like some of the single guys or people that just they didn't have a lot of family here, or maybe had not been here a lot of years, or their family had moved back to whether it was Mexico or somewhere else. They were ready to go. Like, they agreed to be deported. And even some of those people were still sitting there for months. Like, they said, I'll go. And they're still being deported. They're still being held there. So, a few things. First of all, the federal government, the U.S. federal government, I thought that's why you're picking these people up to the Trump administration. I thought that's why you're picking them up, to deport them. And then they say, okay, well, I'll go be deported. Send me back, and then you're still holding them for months and months. So a big part of that is money. This is a multi-billion-dollar industry that holds people in detention. When we got there, remember I told you there's 3 components here. There's the federal government part, which is the ICE folks, and also there's a public health unit of federal government employees. And then there's the GEO group. There's 2 main prison and detention companies, GEO and CoreCivic. This is run, unlike Dilley, which is run by CoreCivic, this is run by GEO. So the GEO folks, and then the Texas National Guard people, who I talked to also, but I'll get to that in a second. So I asked at one point, I said, okay, well, who's the highest ranking GEO person here? So, he comes over, and I ask him, we're standing out here in this field or whatever that's got this, that razor wire, circular razor wire around it, and all the fencing and everything. And I said, hey, what's the profit on this facility, right? You've got 1,700 people in here right now. How much does GEO make off of this facility? And he said, well, I'm not involved in the contracting. I don't have that number. And I said, well, is it tens of millions or just millions, or what's the, how much? Do you have any sense of what you're making? And he didn't. The man from GEO just couldn't give me a number, or wouldn't give me a number at all. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry for GEO and CoreCivic to operate these facilities. And as I understand, there are huge hedge funds, for example, that have interests, financial interests in these facilities, in these prisons, basically. But this thing is absolutely a prison. I don't think anybody would dispute if they walked into that thing that it's a prison. And then I met with the Texas National Guard. So Greg Abbott has deployed the Texas National Guard, Task Force Osprey is what it's called, and it's under Operation Lone Star. And so he's deployed them for months now into detention centers, including into Dilley, where they've imprisoned a 2-month-old baby. They were holding Liam Ramos and his dad. But at STIPC, I met with a captain who was out of San Antonio, who's in charge of the region, and then a lieutenant who was in charge of the facility. And I told them, first of all, I thank them for their service in the Guard as service members, but I said I disagree with this mission, and I disagree with the governor. And So it's not personal against you guys. It's not personal against the Guard members. In fact, we'd heard over the months from Guard members who were incredibly frustrated because they never signed up to do detention work. They'd rather sign up to defend our country in war than some of them than be assigned to this stuff. And so met with those guys, and they help in the whole deportation process by doing the back office or administrative work. So they do all of this work. But remember, what that does is it frees up other ICE officers to go into the streets. So those ICE officers, because Greg Abbott is supporting this mission, those ICE officers are able to go into Minneapolis. They're able to go into San Antonio like they did yesterday and go in, barge into a house with no warrant and assault a homeowner in San Antonio, Texas. They're able to do that and get out into the streets more because Greg Abbott is supporting this mission. So look, the Texas press, very clearly, Greg Abbott is an enabler here. He is supporting what's going on. So, the Texas press needs to get a clear answer from Greg Abbott about why he supports ICE going into San Antonio, and we saw an incident in Donna, and breaking into Texans' home with no warrant, no judicial warrant, and roughing people up. The governor is so weak. We have such a weak governor. He's refusing to protect Texans. He's refusing to stand up to Donald Trump at all and say, hey, leave my residents of Texas alone. If you don't have a warrant, don't go into their house. A basic thing. This is what libertarians and conservatives have been fearing for generations. The overreach of a federal government that would barge into your house, no warrant, guns drawn, and come after you. And now it's happening, and we have a weak governor that doesn't say a word, even though his residents are being abused. He's enabling this. He's enabling the cruelty. He's enabling the unconstitutional behavior, the violations. So that's what's going on. People complained about being treated like animals. And again, these were people, the overwhelming majority of them, that have family who are out there that they can no longer support. They were productive members of the community. They were working, so the business leaders who come out, all of whom supported a government of these policies, supported elected officials, many of them supported elected officials who are enabling this. But then people in the hospitality industry, the agriculture industry, the construction industry, now they're coming and saying, oh, my business is going to go under, or my business has gone under. In San Antonio, in the news, and San Antonians, y'all know this, in the news, we keep seeing restaurant after restaurant after restaurant that's closing. That's not a coincidence. A big part of it is the labor force and the fact that it's gone. You see people that are waiting forever to get their homes built. People that can actually afford, okay, I want to build a house, or I'm trying to get a house in this new subdivision that's being built, whether it's on the far west side or out on the north side or wherever it may be, and it's taking forever. They can't get it done. Well, to the folks in those industries who are making that legitimate complaint now, I have to say, you did it to yourself. Most of you guys, or many of you guys, you did it to yourself. And I just visited with your workforce in there. And that's been, this country, there's been a lot of hypocrisy in this country for a lot of years. There are 4 or 5 major industries that would not exist the way they do but for immigrant labor. And quite honestly, the agriculture industry, the construction industry, all of it, undocumented labor. And there are a lot of people that got rich because of that. And on the other hand, also, for Americans generally, a lot of that was keeping prices down. A lot of that was the only reason that people could afford stuff. but nobody really wants to talk about it. And so now what's happening? Prices are going up. Prices of homes, at restaurants. You go into a restaurant, the restaurants are half empty. Or you go into a restaurant, the restaurant's half empty, and they still can't seat you for 20 minutes because they don't have the staff they need. Or they don't have the dishwashers or whatever it is. So what we just saw in Stipsy and all that, there was like this reluctance for a big part of the country to admit that these people were part and parcel of the American community. These people that have been here, like some of them, we heard 15 years, 20 years, 30 years. A guy that said, I've been here 27 years. Like, I have 3 kids. I've been working. He knows, yes, I came into the country without papers, but, he was saying, but like I've tried, I've been working, I've been supporting my family, I don't have a criminal record. These were a lot of the people that a few years ago, most of us agreed, okay, you ought to put them on a path to citizenship or get them a visa so they can work if they're working out in the fields. Here they are at Stipsy. All right, y'all. I'll have more to talk about soon. We're still monitoring what's going on with Liam Ramos. And, along with the chorus of other Americans, we'll push back as hard as we can against the Trump administration that's trying to take this boy again. When I left Dilley with his dad and with Liam, the ICE person said that he had a 1-year parole in place, his dad, that he had been granted 1-year parole in place. So I guess I don't understand now why the federal government is trying to go after them and get them again. But we're going to work on all of that and find out some more. All right? We'll talk to you soon.